Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast where funny people sit down, take a deep breath and admit they don't know why they're funny. Every episode I peel back the jokes, the personas and the emotional duct tape to ask one question. What does comedy actually mean to those who perform it? No how-to guides, no inspirational speeches, just comedy in a nutshell. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 2,000 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is the deadpan powerhouse from New Zealand, instantly recognisable by his iconic grey suit and razor-sharp delivery. A staple of TV comedy with standout appearances on Have You Been Paying Attention, Patriot Brains, and Taskmaster New Zealand. He's a multiple-time nominee for New Zealand's prestigious Billy T. James Award, and in 2022 won awards for Best Joke and Best TV Comedy Performance. With sold-out festival shows and an international following, he turns quiet awkwardness into huge laughs. His comedian, Ray O'Leary. If you remember all the way back to the early days growing up as a child, was comedy like a big influence on you back then?
Oh yes, yes. I think so. Not stand up though. It was normally more through sitcoms and things like that. Like I definitely remember doing things like I don't know. I like watching an episode of Friends or something and seeing something, and you hear the laugh track go off, and then I guess I thought it was funny because the laugh track had happened, and then I'd go and I'd try to repeat the joke to my mum in the kitchen, who was like, I don't know, busy, washing the dishes or preparing our lunch for tomorrow. So the last thing she wants to hear is some 8-year-old badly retelling a joke from a sitcom he doesn't quite understand. And I definitely recall bombing a lot in that kitchen. Those jokes. Yeah, I remember being a child and writing a joke about a rabbit that I don't know the joke really made. I can't even remember what it is. I remember having a joke book as a kid. And I'd say when I was 13, I believe, was when I saw my first ever stand-up special. That was Ellen DeGeneres' special. And I just, watching it, I just loved the way she treated her staff. I thought it was just incredible the way, I thought that was incredible. And also actually, you'd understand the reference to Michael Barrymore. He, I think he had his own show and it would air in New Zealand. And as a 2-year-old or something, I loved Michael Barrymore. So there was always just, a lot of comedy. I remember my uncle showing me Monty Python, New Zealand influences. There was, I remember staying up late in my cousin's bedroom listening to Fred Dagg, who was a comedy character in New Zealand. It was sort of like a, New Zealand farmer type character. Very, very, very funny. And so, I guess, it was always there. And when I was 13, there was a brief period of time where I even thought about becoming a stand-up comedian. Yeah. And I remember even like having like this terrible half-baked routine in my head, and I tried testing it on my friends in conversation and bombing again. And then I kind of put that away for a long, long time.
So what was it that got you on the stage finally then? Was it those influences or was there some other catalyst moment?
I guess it was that. I think I was always like the funny kid, I suppose. Like I was never a class clown. Well, I was never the one who wanted to jump in front of everyone and get attention and things like that. Like I was a much more, I guess, quietly kind of funny, another actually distinct memory, which I feel like is a very comedian type memory to have or moment, was I remember making a joke. Like a teacher had asked the whole class a question. And I remember whispering a joke to my friends, and that got a laugh. And then my friend said it louder to the room and got a big laugh. I remember being so mad that my joke had been stolen, and that was my laugh. Even though I didn't have the bravery to say it to the class. I don't remember what the setup was, but I remember the punchline was Pangea. So it was like, you can only imagine the hilariousness that could have come from prehistoric geography. But
must have been quite the setup.
Yeah, it must have been I think we had learned about Pangea earlier that day, so it was a callback. But I definitely remember that happening. But yeah, so I was always like, I guess a quietly funny guy, I suppose.
Mm.
Probably fair to say. And then I went to university, and I'd sort of put comedy aside, like I wasn't thinking about it at all.
Mm.
Um, and then I don't know what exactly happened. I remember there was a comedy competition where I lived, and I considered joining, and then I chickened out. And me and my friends used to go and watch a regular comedy night of local comedians, and
Mm.
this was in Wellington, New Zealand. Um, and then eventually, I had a day job, and I was working at this day job, and yeah, I think sort of my final year of uni and my first year in this job, I had been like writing down joke ideas. I knew I wanted to do it, but I was scared, and I
Mhm.
guess I guess I was just trying to really plan out my routine.
Yeah.
And I was also aware, because I was a big fan of comedy, I was aware that I would be bad for a long time. Like I knew you didn't just get up there and it was live at the Apollo or Def Comedy Jam the first night. I knew. I would probably bomb. In my head, I was like, I'm probably going to be bad at this for about a year. So I think that probably kept me away from doing it as well.
Mm.
And eventually, I think I just found my job boring enough, and I hated the hours in particular. I hated having to wake up to an alarm. I hated. Yeah, I hated getting up at 6 a.m. or 7, whenever it was.
Mm.
It wasn't even that the job was that bad, really. I just hated that it wasn't the hours I was choosing to keep.
Mm.
And so eventually that made me think, screw it, I want to become a comedian. And I finally signed up for an open mic night. And sorry, I'm taking a very long time to answer this question. But I signed up to an open mic night.
Yeah.
I remember a guy backstage who was, in inverted commas, he was headlining the open mic. Uh, I remember him telling me that I was probably going to be bad because it was my first time, which I remember thinking was a very rude thing to say, but also I already thought I was going to be bad, so I didn't mind.
Yeah.
Like, your expectations are low, but mine are even lower. And I remember I had a good first set. I remember I
Mm.
had a good first set, and basically since that day, I've basically not stopped gigging, or I've gigged as often as I could, apart from COVID, basically.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going onto the stage then, and having done it for the first time and the first few times, did it stand up to what you had in your mind? Did you have kind of expectations of what it meant to be a comedian going in, and what surprises did you encounter?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I didn't. I I kind of had a rough idea, mate. I knew enough about comedy that I knew it wasn't just, like, I don't know, you book an open mic, you crush it, and then all of a sudden, you're headlining all over the country. I knew that wouldn't happen, but I think I didn't have an idea of really what all the intermediate steps were and things like that. And
Mm.
but I think, because again, I'd been going to local comedy nights, and I'd seen some of the same people over and over, and I think in my head, I guess I must have assumed that they were all doing it full time,
Mm.
which none of them were. No one in no one. This is it's Wellington, New Zealand. There's I think there's 300,000 people. It's a pretty small city, I guess,
Mm.
globally,
Mm.
and not big enough to, yeah. I think there's only really one person now still who does comedy there full time.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I just didn't have any expectations. I just knew I needed to keep gigging, and I knew I wanted to quit my job.
Mhm.
So I knew, and I had like in my head done a calculation of some. It was something like if I make $300 a week or $350 a week,
Mm.
I can quit this job and I'll just eat baked beans all the time. It'll be baked beans for every meal, but I'll have so much free time, and that was the big thing, is just having time. I just felt like time was such a valuable resource,
Mm.
because you can't get it back. So
Yeah.
so that was the big thinking.
Yeah. And what about your stage persona, the person that you are on stage? How much of, first of all, is that you, and how much is it like a version of you, an exaggeration or a character of you? And did you have that on your mind going in?
Yeah, I think every comedian's stage, almost every comedian's stage persona is probably roughly 90% them. I
Mm.
think. I guess some people have maybe some characters that are more pronounced, but at the end of the day, it is you writing the jokes and stuff. So it's got to,
Yeah.
there's always going to be you in there. And for me, I think it was very, yeah, quite similar. Well, at least at the start, I have friends who debate it now.
Mm.
But at the start, I think I was just generally a less confident person before I did comedy,
Yeah.
but also being on stage, I was terrified. I was so nervous all the time. Yeah, I was so anxious about it going badly or me forgetting my lines and things like that. So
Mm.
I would like the first few gigs, I would barely look at the crowd. I think by the about 3 months in, I was able to look at the crowd, but every time I told a punchline, I would then look down at my feet. I think was how I managed to get to after 3 months. I remember, after a first few gigs, I remember this kind woman who has sort of helped run gigs in the Wellington scene. I remember her coming up to me and saying, "Look, I know it's a part of your character, but I think you should try look at the audience." And I remember, yeah, and I remember thinking, "I'm not. This isn't an intentional. I'm
Yeah.
glad you think it's sort of a cleverly constructed character piece, but I'm just doing all I can to survive up there. Like I can barely move." And that's sort of what set my character on the character I guess I am, and because that, I mean, it is what I am like, but also I am so anxious on stage, or I was so anxious that all I could do was just stand there and tell jokes. I wouldn't have the confidence to do like a big act out, or I don't know, run around. I can't do impressions, so I don't do them. Just I feel like the nerves limited me to what yeah, to what I am, and
Mm.
now, um, yeah. So I guess the character was always there, and I think it's evolved a bit now. I think now sometimes I take more swipes at the audience than I used to in the beginning. I think I've become maybe more aware of how I come across on stage,
Mm.
but definitely, basically, the character was almost 90% there because it was me, and I was terrified. So
Mm.
yeah, I was just deadpan the whole time. Couldn't emote. Couldn't do anything.
Do you still get that sort of nervousness, that anxiety? Because you've performed a lot since
Yes,
then.
absolutely. Yeah. So I guess the point, the moral is that I wish I could be like, I don't know, Chris Rock or so, that's the dream, but it's not. Yeah, again, what I'm doing is not some sort of masterfully planned character that I've spent months trying to figure out. It's just I'm just doing all I can, and this is the best I can do, unfortunately.
You said about how you'd performed almost continuously apart from COVID. So, what does a comedian with a burgeoning career do when it looks like there's no more comedy? What did you do with that time?
Well, yeah. So I was in New Zealand at the
Mm.
time, and New Zealand had I think, a relatively different lockdown experience to the rest of the world,
Mhm.
and so I'm trying to recall how long our initial lockdown was, but we went into I don't know, I guess relatively severe lockdown. I suppose all the shops shut, we were all at home
Mm.
in our bubbles, and but it ended up, I think, only lasting about 6 weeks, maybe longer.
Mm.
Um, and it was actually quite a nice time. I think, I mean, maybe not for everyone, but I think for that first initial lockdown, in New Zealand at least,
Mm.
I think there was a sense that we were beating the virus. We were watching the numbers go down.
Mm.
It was sort of it was quite nice. And then we were let out for, I forget how many months.
Mm.
But also being let out was amazing as well, because we knew the rest of the world was in lockdown, and we were free to go about and do whatever, and we weren't worried about the virus. And the best thing was that no international artists um, could tour to New Zealand. So if the public wanted to be entertained, they had to come to us, and so we had literally a captive market, and so it was sort of a brief golden age for those few months of doing comedy. It was a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, during the first initial 6 months, 6 months, the first lockdown we had in New Zealand, I basically was just like, I'm going to take a break. And I just sort of didn't really do, I didn't do much, which is looking back is maybe it was a terrible idea. But yeah, I just sort of took a break. And then we had a second lockdown in New Zealand, which lasted a lot longer, and it was not clear when it was going to end. And that during that lockdown, I tried writing, and I tried to write a next year's show basically. And then it ended up being that almost all the material I wrote was no good at all. But that's just the nature of writing, I think.
Well, on the subject of touring and having a captive New Zealand audience, how different do you find your comedy being received in different places where you perform, or how do you adjust your comedy to different cultural reference points?
It's a good question, and I get asked it a lot, and I think the answer is that what I tend to find is that the biggest shock to me is that other countries laugh more. That's the biggest. It's actually quite a relief to come to go to another country, but it's something I hear a lot talking to other comedians, is that New Zealand crowds can be quite tough, and it's not that we're not enjoying the material per se. I just think we're a naturally reserved people, and I think I don't know if you've heard of a term called tall poppy syndrome, but it's the idea that the metaphor comes from if a poppy gets too tall, it gets cut down, so it stays the same height as all the other poppies. And there's the view that New Zealand has tall poppy syndrome. The idea that if anyone tries to achieve too much or pop their head out of the parapets, they all get cut down and brought down to everyone else. And I think that tall poppy psychology even applies to audience members, like them being. I feel like some people are afraid to laugh too loudly in case they get attention gets drawn to them, or they laugh and no one else laughs. It's that being said, I do think our audiences can be tough, but the benefit of that, the plus side, is that it's meant that a lot of New Zealand comedians have had to work really hard to get a laugh out of them. And I think that's why you see so many Kiwis or comedians who started in New Zealand do so well overseas. And, like Melanie Bracewell, Guy Montgomery, the Concords, Rose Matafeo, Ursula, Rhys Darby. There's so many. For a country of our size, the comedic export is quite high. And I think that's because of that. So that's the main difference. But otherwise, in terms of sense of humor, I feel like it's very similar. I think. I mean, I guess New Zealand and Australia were obviously historically quite close, very incredibly close to Britain. So it's not unsurprising that there's a sort of a link there, humor-wise. And the other thing is that when I very first started doing comedy, I always had this mind of thinking, well, what if I want to go overseas and tour, or I don't want to have written all these routines about niche New Zealand artifacts that only New Zealand crowds could possibly understand. And so I made a point of trying to not write jokes about, I don't know, the local small town, or like the Briscoe's lady who's like a woman in lots of ads over in New Zealand. You don't want to have all these strange and so and that helped as well, because that meant I didn't have to change any of my material when I go overseas. Sticking to that, though, there are always lots of little things that you never expect, which is annoying. And I don't think there's ever impacted a joke of mine. But there's sometimes be different words and things like that that I have to use, like I have to say card reader instead of IFPOS machine,
Mhm.
or the other one is I had a whole routine about mattress protectors and stuff, and so some countries say duvet, some say doona. So that was a real. So those are the little things that catch me up from time to time. But
Right.
luckily, I've not had to wholesale, throw out a routine because the crowd didn't understand. But actually, even actually in the current show that I'm touring, I have a joke about taking the bus. And I think for most places around the world, taking the bus can be, I guess, looked down upon or sometimes associated with lower socioeconomic
Mm.
status, which isn't, I guess, I'm making fun of myself for taking the bus, basically. But I was thinking, while I was here in the UK, I was like, oh, it's probably not that weird to take the bus, especially in London where everyone takes public transport. It's not,
Yeah.
it's kind of weird. But anyway, we'll see if it bombs horribly in the Soho.
You mentioned some comedians there who are New Zealand exports,
Mhm.
and particularly Menini Bracewell, who hopefully will have a future episode of this podcast. But you've got quite a great relationship. I saw you supporting her in 2024 on her Forget Me Not tour.
Oh, you did. You came to that
I
show.
came to that as well.
Oh, did you come to the one? There was one London one where sort of tickets had somehow been double sold by both the ticket outlet and the venue, and we had to kick out a bunch of people. You didn't come to that one, did you?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I remember I had to kick out my friends. I'd be like, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Oh,
But also you and Melanie, you do reels together. You have this kind of reciprocal
yeah,
thing, and you both appeared on Taskmaster NZ series
yeah.
4.
Beautiful pronunciation of NZ. Thank you.
That's the only way I've ever heard it. So, is it just that you have a really close working relationship, a close friendship, or is it, as Jeremy Wells said, that New Zealand has like 8 people in it?
Yeah, no, it's all for show. We put it on for the cameras, but as soon as they're off, I'm out of there. No, she makes me sick, honestly. If you could see when the mask comes off and the true Melanie Bracewell comes out, honestly. Um, yeah, and she's got a gambling problem as well. Let people know that. No, no, she's very nice. We're good friends. Even before I came over here, I dog sat for her. So it's a genuine friendship, and we've known each other. like, Well, it's a combination of two things: of New Zealand only having 8 people, and then us getting on. So the, it's a really good thing, I think, about the New Zealand comedy scene, and I think it probably helps make shows like Taskmaster in New Zealand work so well. Is that it's very hard to do comedy in New Zealand and not meet nearly everyone who does comedy.
Yeah.
Um, and, and like yeah, like you like very early on. I remember, I think I was 6 months in, and I was very lucky. The comedy club at the time in Wellington gave me the beginner's spot on the weekend show, and Ursula Carlson was headlining, and she, I think, is probably the biggest comedian in New Zealand, or certainly the biggest ticket seller probably. And I remember thinking, like, this would be like if I had done a gig with Jerry Seinfeld in America 6 months. Just these things just wouldn't happen in any other country. And just the gap between being a newbie and pro in New Zealand is so small, and you just meet everyone. And so I would have met Mel in 2017, maybe 2016. And we've just known each other the whole time and been friends. You just always gig together. You always work together. We get on. We write together.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very lucky. Yeah, and the whole New Zealand comedy scene is like that. It's very supportive. We all know each other. We all like one another. We there was a great thing we did. Sort of one of my favorite moments on stage in Melbourne, the Melbourne Comedy Festival in 2024, I believe, where there was a show called Comedians auditioning for musicals, and my friends and at the time Sam Campbell had been making it. Sam Campbell would end his shows by saying, "Don't go see a New Zealand comedian." That was, and my friend came up with this idea. Of getting all the New Zealand comedians to fight back against him through a musical number. And so all the New Zealand comedians got on stage and sung "Do You Hear the People Sing" together. And anyway, so just like, New Zealand is small enough that everyone knows each other, whereas here in the UK, I talk to my friends or I talk to people and they say, actually, I was speaking to a friend just the other day, and she's been doing it for 2 years here, and she said only just now is she starting to see people for a second time at gigs and stuff. Whereas, in New Zealand, that's unheard of. You're seeing the same people all the time. Whereas, the UK is just so massive. It seems hard to meet everyone.
Do you watch comedy for yourself? Do you watch your comedian friends just as a support, or can you be entertained by it, or do you now sit and watch it analytically, or just avoid it altogether?
In theory, I could be entertained by it, but they're not very good. And so I wish, Mark. Oh, I would love to be entertained by my peers, but only. No, I'll go to their festival shows and things like that, and especially in the early development of our shows, sometimes we'll record our work in progress shows and send them to one another. So I've actually, some shows I've heard the jokes already, and I've tried to suggest ideas or things, shift the show around or whatever it is. I know I will absolutely go watch my friends' shows and watch my peers' shows. I think that is one of the great things about doing the long festivals, especially Melbourne and New Zealand. I would always try and go see as many shows as I can, and I'll definitely do that, and always go try to see my friends and see what they're up to. And it can be quite heartwarming. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm friends with some really talented people. It's quite it's almost validating for me somehow watching them. I'm friends with this person and they're very good. That's so nice. I can't believe they'd want to be friends with me. I've had that. Yeah, I've had that watching Emma Holland, who's an Australian comedian, watching her most recent show in Edinburgh. I thought I was blown away. It was so good. Talking generally about watching comedy, it is a weird thing because I do enjoy it and I do watch it. And like the other day, I actually watched some Mike Rice reels, who's I believe a comedian. I don't know up and comer is probably not quite the right word, but he's a good comedian here in the UK, and and it was making me laugh. So I still do watch comedy for joy, but also I am constantly terrified that I'm, sometimes you stand at the back of the room and you kind of just. And instead of seeing and sometimes I worry that now I'm not enjoying the comedy for my own sake. I'm like, am I like listening to see, how's that going? Like, did the crowd laugh at that? Like, it's, I worry about that happening, they're analyzing what's going on in the room as opposed to, enjoying the comedy for itself.
Well, how about your competitive side then when you're up against your peers? Because, you've had many nominations for things like Billy T and what have you, and you're a winner as well. So how do you feel about awards and competitions and things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the rational side of you does know, an award is, sometimes it's five, maybe, five of your lucky, sometimes 10 of your lucky people sitting in a room and, 6 of them say, "Oh, we like this guy" or whatever, and it's just 6 people's opinion. So, I don't know. I think a rational part of me does think, oh, it doesn't matter. There is obviously another part of me that is, I would like that. That's nice to have. It's always nice to be nominated. It is validated. It is nice. I do. I don't know if I would say I'm competitive per se. Like. I'm trying to describe it I'm not upset if someone else wins an award over me. There have been 2 times I recall standing backstage. Once with the Billy T and Angela Dravid won it, and recently in 2024 when I was nominated for the Melbourne Comedy Festival Award, and then Sarah Keys won it. And both times, I just remember an insane feeling of relief coming over me when my name was not read out. So so I don't know what that says about me. But yeah, I'm not. I'm very happy to lose awards. Very happy. I often think, often it's quite well deserved for me to lose. The fact that I'm even nominated is crazy when that happens. But I wouldn't say that I'm competitive. I like to think that I'm competitive with myself, though. Like I always want to be getting better and improving, and getting bigger laughs and better laughs and writing better material. But it's not about and I do want to be a very funny person, and it is nice when people compliment you after you do a mixed bill or a lineup show and say they enjoyed your stuff. But it's not about being I don't think the thing is about being better than the other comedians. The point is just I want to be better, full stop. So I hope that's what's going on in my mind.
You said there about the show that you were nominated at Melbourne for in 2024. So that was Your Laughter Is Only Making Me Stronger.
Yes.
Great title for a start,
thank you so much.
Which I saw in Edinburgh. And then, of course, you're currently touring the 2025 show.
Yes. It starts with laughter.
Oh, yes, of course. Laughter, I Hardly Knew Her, which is, again, another great title. So,
thank you.
And which I also saw in Edinburgh last year. And one thing that I've noticed before I ask you specifically about the show and its tour currently is that something I noticed in there, which apparently is a thing, is how audience members dress up as you.
Did that happen in the shows you came and saw by chance?
Yeah.
Or was it? Oh, really? Oh my God! I can't. Maybe it's happening so often I can't even remember it now. I can't even remember.
There was a couple in the front row of the last Edinburgh I saw.
They're dressed up like me.
They were together. They were both in grey suits with curly wigs on.
And
I'm not surprised. I mean, if I saw that, I would want to put it out of my memory also. So I don't know.
Is that why you struggled to remember my show name? You saw me and you try to put me
erase the whole thing. Yeah,
you try to put me out of your memory because I do. I dress like that as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mark. Sorry, you were collateral damage. I apologize.
It's interesting. Before I ever did comedy, I remember my friends at uni, they threw me a birthday party, and they all dressed like me. But this was before I did comedy, so they just all had curly wigs on. And I remember my friend saying, "How does it feel knowing you can buy your haircut as a funny wig from a shop?" And so so it's always sort of been like that. I do, it's interesting when people dress like me. It's definitely distracting, and I'm not sure what to do, like to address it or not. But I think ultimately it is what's the way to describe it? Flattering, I suppose. And the cynic in me is like, oh, this means I have a distinctive style that people can immediately recognize. The fact that people can dress up as me means that, like, I'm recognizable. People can spot me. So that's So I think in terms of, like, if I was thinking purely in terms of marketing strategies and advertising synergies and all that jazz, I'd think, that's very good, because I do think, speaking more broadly about comedy and your character and whatnot, I do think there are a number of comedians who I've enjoyed who you sometimes wonder, oh, why have they not experienced more success? And I think a big element of who becomes successful and who doesn't is whether or not they have a distinct character on stage, and could you elevator pitch this comedian to another person? Can you describe this comedian in a quick, short sentence to your friends? And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think I do have that, people could just say, oh, he's that dry guy who wears the grey suit, or he's that deadpan guy with the curly hair. Like there are descriptors for me that people can quickly convey who I am to others. And I think, yeah, sometimes you watch a comedian who's really, really funny and you think, why have I never heard of this person before? And I think sometimes there's I guess the elevator pitch part missing from their persona. And not that I intentionally set out to do that. Again, this is sort of just who I am, but I'm very lucky that I was able. It turns out that who I am is someone that's easily caricaturable, easily stereotyped. Very easily to be put in a box, I suppose, in people's minds, which is good.
Well, let's have the elevator pitch for the show then that you're touring now. The show I saw in Edinburgh. For listeners who aren't aware, what's the show about? What can they expect?
Oh, well, I mean, I'd love to hear your elevator pitch.
I told you, I put it out of my mind.
That's true. That's a good for anyone listening who wants to come see it a second time. You won't have remembered it. Most likely, you'll be so shell-shocked the first experience that you'll have completely wiped it. So all the jokes will be new to you. I guess I'd be interested in how you describe it. I guess in my mind, I sometimes feel like my shows don't have a theme per se. I'm not a comedian who tends to write a show with a narrative. What I guess is sometimes referred to as like an Edinburgh hour or something like that. Where at the 45-minute mark there's an emotional moment or something like that. I'm not. It just sort of what I like to do, and what it seems that some people seem to enjoy. Not obviously present company excluded, but other people have enjoyed. But I guess it's sort of a series of jokes. I sort of start with I guess an impromptu autism diagnosis I received, and then I sort of build on that and talk about another part of my life, and then keep going from there. But it's largely fundamentally, maybe this is not. Look, I shouldn't be allowed to advertise my own shows, but in my mind, it's fundamentally an hour of the funniest things I think I've thought of in the past year or so, and other people seem to have found it funny. So I think you will as well. For those listening, I hope you do. I guess that's why I guess I was interested to hear I guess if you had an elevator pitch for the show, because in my mind, people ask me what's the show about, and I think, it's not really about anything per se. This is a comedy podcast, so I think it's okay to show how the sausage gets made. Like my friend Melanie Bracewell. She had a great show the other year, and it was about you saw Forget Me Not, which was that was about like her granddad passing away and having dementia, and her partner's issues with memory loss. And then she did a show the next year, and it was about her earpods, losing her earpods. And again, which again, the stakes don't sound very high, but it was an incredibly funny show and a very engaging story. But my shows never have that kind of through line. So when I'm asked, what's your show about? I always worry a little bit, how do I answer this question? But the shows are fundamentally, it's an hour of funny things that hopefully you've not thought of before.
Yeah, for sure. Dry observations, a askance view, I'd say.
Yes, that's what I'd hope. Yes, I don't know if that's how you'd elevator pitch it. Really, we should just cut out everything I've just said and just cut straight to you saying that.
Well, you're currently doing UK, then I'm assuming that goes to Australia and New Zealand.
Yes, so it's sort of a terrible system of touring I've set up, where so I've done Laughter I Hardly Know. I did that throughout New Zealand and Australia in 2025, and I did it at the Edinburgh Fringe as well. And now I'm doing it throughout the UK and Ireland.
Right.
And so you guys are getting, I guess, the most honed version of the show. I've done it the most times. And right now in Australia, I had just been in Perth and I was running in a new show. So I'm starting to work on my new show for Australia as well. And so as soon as I'm done here in the UK, I'll go back to Australia and I'll throw this show out of my mind and try get back into the new show again. Um, so yeah, which is it's interesting to sort of have two shows running concurrently in your brain.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's the system I've set up. So yeah, so the show I'm doing it in Australia. As soon as I leave here, and then all things going well, hopefully people will be able to see it at the Edinburgh Fringe and another and then a UK tour as well. The new show.
So on the subject of your dry observations, I know that you studied philosophy.
Yes, correct.
And people talk about comedians being like philosophers or pseudo-philosophers, if you will.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. How much does that ring true for you? Is it just sort of thoughts and asking questions? And is that the stance of a philosopher, or is it the things that you observe are laugh-worthy in and of themselves? Really test your masters now.
Interesting question. I'll maybe I'll answer the first part first, and then I might ask you to repeat the second part. But the idea, the comparison of comedians and philosophers, I think sometimes in my mind I think it's accurate, and sometimes I think it's a deep insult to both professions. But I do think there is an element of them having similarities, like both philosophers and comedians sort of, I guess, take a deep look at the world around them and I guess sort of question what is going on, or question the underlying fundamentals of what's happening, and how it all works and how it all fits together.
Yeah.
And though the differences, and this is actually because my philosophy degree did actually influence my comedy, at least very early on. Because in my mind, so I studied it was the analytic branch of philosophy, but in that system, I guess in all philosophy, you start with you have an argument, so you have a premise, you have a if then statement of, you're arguing towards a conclusion. You have a series of premises in your argument and you defend each one, and then you have a conclusion at the end. And the conclusion is meant to be true. And in comedy, it's actually quite similar in that you do have an argument, but the premises are all twisted. The logic doesn't have to be quite all there, but you are sort of arguing towards a conclusion. But rather, you're not really necessarily trying to argue for a conclusion that's true. You're just trying to argue for a conclusion that's funny. And I used to, I did kind of used to think that way when I would craft my bits very early on, because I used to do, I suppose, a lot more political stuff. And maybe even now I do think about it in this way, in the same way, but maybe the stakes are much lower. But definitely in my head, I always think I have this opinion. I have the opinion I have. Someone else has an opposing opinion. And in philosophy, one of the ways of showing your opponent's opinion is wrong is an argumentative strategy called a reductio ad absurdum. And so that means to reduce to the absurd. Like you point out that their argument contains an absurdity. So, for example, the philosopher Immanuel Kant, he once said that it's always wrong to lie, always. You can never tell a lie, never, never, ever. And then someone did a reductio ad absurdum to him. Someone said, oh, what if a axe murderer came to your door and asked you where your family and kids were? Could you lie to him then? You'd have to, according to you'd have to tell him the truth, and that's absurd, so therefore your view is wrong. Immanuel Kant, actually, he did, in reality, he did bite the bullet and say, yeah, you can't lie to axe murderers, which is... to be fair, I think he never married and never had children, so maybe he wasn't that fast. But anyway, the point is, they were able to find out something ridiculous about his view, which is this idea that you can't lie to axe murderers, which seems like a crazy thing to argue for. and so that's sort of how I feel about how I felt about my views. I think this. Other people think the opposite, but if I think something, then I must be right. So I've got the correct opinion, and if they have a wrong opinion, there must be a way to show that it is absurd or contains an absurdity, and so then I would try write in that way, So I had this sort of the argumentative strategies I learned in my philosophy classes underpinned what I was doing quite explicitly when I was doing more political material when I first started out, and even now. Thinking about it, just talking to you, I suppose I do still do it now, but now the stakes are a lot lower. Like thinking back to my last year's show that your laughter is just making me stronger, and that show I had a bit about a mattress protector, and I think that kind of stemmed from me. The inspiration for that stemmed from me being angry that I had to buy a mattress protector, and I guess in my mind. I had this opinion of this is useless. Why do I have this? Why do I have to buy this piece of fabric? And I guess the rest of society are of the opinion you need a mattress protector. And I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, well, there must be something absurd about you thinking I need a mattress protector because I'm right. I'm right that it's ridiculous that I need to buy one. And so I guess I kind of still write comedy the same way. Just I'm having that realization as I talk to you now. But again, the stakes are much lower. It's about mattress protectors as opposed to, great political truths and things like that. But it's still the same underlying philosophical argument, And again, thinking about other things, like another bit I did early on in my career was a bit about how I hated watching the sunrise. Because it sort of happened twice. I went on holiday with a friend and she wanted to watch the sunrise over Angkor Wat. And I remember thinking, this is not that good. and also I was also at the time watching my flatmate. Later on, I was watching my flatmate's dog. I remember the dog woke up early and needed to go to the bathroom. And I took it outside and I could see the sunrise in. And I was so mad that I was watching the sunrise. And I remember thinking, people think this is, society thinks this is beautiful. Society thinks this is something worth photographing, capturing, waking up for, and I hate it. So they must be wrong. I must be right. There must be a way to point out how ridiculous it is. So sorry. Anyway, I just had that realization now. Sorry for rambling for so long.
No, that's right. I get upset about the sunrise because it's like the sun isn't moving. We're moving towards it. They should be looking at us.
That's true. The sun should be going, oh my God, there's an Earthrise.
Well, what about a philosophy all your own then? Have you learned one important lesson in your career thus far that sort of informs what you do going forward?
Oh, that's a very good question. I actually have made a list of rules on my phone for how to be good at comedy, how to do comedy, things like I made it sort of trying to remember all the things I've learned. Unfortunately, the most important one I think is quite a bland, practical piece of advice, but it's something that I stick to, and I think it is so important, is to simply record your sets and listen back to them, and the things that don't get laughs, cut them, and the things that do get laughs, keep them. And it is a very boring piece of advice, and it's very it's not a grand pronouncement. It's certainly not particularly philosophical. Sorry, but in terms of practical utility, though, it is incredibly useful, and it's almost surprising, I think, how few people do it in a systematic way. But I think that sort of willingness to listen back to my bits and kill your darlings, as they say, kill the jokes that you like but just don't work, I think is a very important part of doing comedy. If I was trying to think perhaps more philosophically, I think an important part of doing comedy, I guess, this maybe harkens back to the character element, is I guess in my mind there are almost two ways of doing comedy when you approach when you're choosing which things to write comedy about.
Yeah.
And then one of the things you can do is you can write about things that other comedians have already spoken about. But if you want to stand out, you have to write about them at a much higher level you have to be incredibly funny
Mm.
and write at a much better level than anyone else has approached that topic. Like, you can write about, I don't know, having kids or being married, topics like that,
Yeah.
which a lot of comedians have covered and covered very well. And so if you want to stand out amongst them, you have to be incredibly funny. I think the New Zealand comedian Nick Rado has taken that approach where the topics he picks are, very relatable, but I think he's doing it at such a high level. He does stand out and is very funny, but
Mm.
I'm much too lazy for that. Like, I don't want to, I can't compete against, all these great comedians who've already talked about the differences between men and women or whatever it is. And so my strategy, I guess, has been to try talk about things that other people aren't talking about, or you feel like you haven't really heard before. And that's what I hope comes across in my shows and stuff. Is like, yeah, like again, like I've never seen a comedian complain about the sun rising for 4 minutes or whatever, and I've not seen a comedian, complain about mattress protectors for 4 minutes and things like that. So I guess that's that. I think that's sort of the lazier way of doing it. Of you pick a topic that no one. I mean, maybe it's harder in the sense that there's perhaps a reason why no other comedian has tried to write a joke about that because it's not particularly funny stuff. But if you are able to crack it, then that just naturally makes you stand out because you're talking about something no one else has spoken about,
Mm.
and so you stand out from the pack, and you probably make a bunch of people go, "Oh yeah, I've never thought about it that way,"
Mm.
but you're right, and yeah, I think that's just a very important part of being a comedian, especially in the modern age where people can go on their phones and see a meme or
Mm.
watch a sketch or whatever, like to justify for the audience to justify to themselves, like for the audience to be justified in them coming out to see you perform a show. I think you need to be offering something different
Mm.
to what the world is already offering them on their phones and whatnot. And so either that is be incredibly, incredibly good, or just talk about things that no one else is talking about.
What do you think have so far in your career been the worst and best experiences you've had through comedy?
Oh, wow. Really good question. I think what are some of the worst experiences? I'm trying to remember, um, being, I suppose there's, especially when you start out, I think, there can be some, what's the word? When I first started out, yeah, I think there can be some jealousies of one another.
Mm.
I think, which I now feel like I have put aside.
Mm.
Yeah, that's something I meant to say earlier. Sorry about the awards thing. Is that
Hmm.
another thing about being nominated for an award? It's something that a friend, Kelsey Del Media, very funny comedian based in Australia, said to me about how the point of getting nominated for an award is to hopefully get enough people to convince people to come and see you tour live.
Mm.
And I am touring live, so I already have the things, that these people want. So the award is almost unnecessary. I do have the life I dreamed of. I'm very lucky, and so that makes me quite secure. I think. Like I don't think I'm as worried about getting some opportunities as I used to be. But definitely when you start out and you don't know if you can make it as a career, you're not making any money. You don't know if it makes sense for you to do this. I think then that's unfortunately,
Mm.
that was the time where I was definitely more insecure and more jealous. And probably those were some of the elements of that were the worst times. Some of you have arguments with friends and things like that. And
Right.
and then you do atrocious gigs. You do some just dreadful, dreadful gigs. I remember a guy it threw his phone up into the rafters, and then he stood up on the table to get it down, and he was shirtless. And I was like 3 months into comedy or something, so I just ignored him. I just let this happen, let this crazy thing go by uncommented on. It was dreadful. Oh, so bad. But the best moments are yeah, things I couldn't even dream of. Like I mentioned doing that musical number on stage, that was incredible. I quite like musicals, and so doing this performance was amazing.
Mm.
What was the other one? I've been on stage while Fly of the Conchords have performed.
Mm.
I was very lucky. I opened for Rhys Darby, and then in Wellington, at the end of the show, the Fly of the Conchords came out and sung a song, and I was on stage with it. That was a dream come true because I'd watched them growing up. They were the guys, and then even simply being here in the United Kingdom right now. Like I did a sold out show in Manchester a few days ago. I've never been to Manchester before in my life. It's the UK is almost the exact opposite side of the world to New Zealand, the antipodes or whatever we call each other. And so the idea that I could travel to almost literally the other side of the globe and that there are 200 or whatever people wanting to hear me tell jokes is just insane. Like I was, that was definitely a pinch me moment. And maybe this is not to flatter yourself too much, but even the fact that you want to interview me is, but genuinely the fact that like people want me to do podcasts with them and things like that is so insane to me, and definitely a thing of like, I couldn't imagine me being a worthwhile subject for an interview or whatever. But the fact that things like this happen is genuinely, it makes you think, oh my God, my life has turned out in ways I couldn't have imagined.
Well, I'm very gratified that you decided to join me today because it's been absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
So tell our listeners then, how can people find out all about you and where they can come and see you performing?
So I don't have a website, but if you go to @Ray Comedy on most social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Truth Social, Rumble, Bebo, LinkedIn, but @Ray Comedy, you should be able to find a link in my bios there to a link tree or to a Live Nation website or something or other, and it should have a list of all my dates. And so I'm touring across the United Kingdom currently, and then the rest of Australia, and then New Zealand for the remainder of 2026. So please come along.
So I asked my last question, and of course, in line with the title of the show, Ray, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Oh, in a nutshell, I think for me, comedy to be my first thought when you told me you were going to ask me this question was to be quite analytical and describe comedy about a series of observations and yada yada. But I think it was to be maybe perhaps more personal and be a bit more human. I think for me, comedy is a way of relating to one another. Like I think as a kid that is what drew me to comedy. The idea of making someone laugh. That is an instant connection, and it's also like instant validation. Like it's very hard to fake a laugh, and if someone said something funny and they laugh, it's an automatic thing. You can get a sense. It's hard to fake a genuine proper laugh, I think, and so it is a sense of validation, of connection. You feel like this person, maybe even if they only laugh, give out you one heart. It is for that one single second, that was like a quick, brief moment of you like admitting that you like me or appreciated what I was saying. It is this sort of validation. So I think I guess it's just a way of like genuinely connecting with others. I think is sort of what drove me to it, and now it's sort of gotten out of control.
Ray, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me, Mark. If you could please repeat me saying that Melanie Brace was a gambling problem.
I'll make that into a downloadable ringtone.